like to welcome to the show Ilya Stemkovsky, and we'd like to congratulate him on his new son. Welcome to the world.
Thank you.
We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Ilya. Congratulations.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, guys.
Ilya is not only a father, he's an amazing drummer. He is a writer for Modern Drummer magazine, and he is one of the more entertaining people you will ever meet. He plays with the Eddie Testa band. He also plays with a bunch of other people, freelancer, but very, very gifted drummer. And
Duke is his agent.
Thank you, guys.
As Ilya's agent now, I'll say thank you.
Thank you for that, guys. I appreciate that. Appreciate the kind words.
Sure, absolutely. So I have a question for you. You've seen so many shows. What would you say as a drummer first and as a non-drummer second? What would be your first as a drummer and your first as a non-drummer?
And you mean just concerts I've been to my whole entire life?
Yes.
Oh, wow. I was not prepared for this question. I would have racked my brain. You know, I've seen a lot of different types of genres, if you will. And so I have to separate it into like rock music and into non-rock music. And so, I mean, we all have our favorite drummers, and, you know, I've seen so many of my favorite guys and missed so many guys. But, you know, if I'm going to go into jazz, I've seen, you know, so many incredible guys, the Bill Stewarts and the Brian Blades with different artists. And one of my very favorite ones was John Zorn's Masada, which has one of my very favorite players in it. His name is Joey Barron. And so I saw that group, I guess in the mid 90s when I was a wee lad. And they would set up at the knitting factory, but they wouldn't set up on the stage. They would set up against the wall, and the audience would be kind of in an amphitheater around them.
Wow.
And I would get there super early, like a super fanboy. And I would literally sit to the side of the drums. It would be 5 feet away. And I'd really never seen anything like that. I mean, I guess you can go on YouTube and see John Zorn's Masada, and they played a lot more after that, bigger festivals and things like that. But in the mid 90s, when they kind of started, there's not a ton of video from what I saw, but it was unbelievable. You know, the command that he had, playing with his fingers, playing with brushes, playing with mallets, swinging his butt off. And that was a very special group. And that was Joey at the top of his game. He might know him from Bill Frisell's band, and he's incredible in Bill Frisell's late 80s, early 90s band. So that's from a jazz standpoint. If I had to pick, I would say John Zorn's Masada. And like I said, all these other guys, the Bill Stewarts and the Brian Blades and all Vinnie Colaiutas, all these guys I've seen. From a rock standpoint, that's really, really hard, you know, but some memorable stuff I've seen is I saw King Crimson in the mid 90s at the Longacre Theater on Broadway when they had the double trio. So I saw that band. They actually released that from the Longacre Theater in 95, I guess. So I saw that group. I mean, I've seen some of my very favorite bands, like a band called Jawbox in the mid 90s, kind of like a angular Fugazi style, a band from the DC area. And that's one of my favorite rock drummers. That's not a household name. His name is Zach Barocas. And Jawbox was one of my very main influential bands in the mid 90s. So they were really special every time I saw them in, you know, smaller clubs, Trocadero, Maxwell's, things like that. So if I had to say, kind of under the radar, John Zorn's Masada for jazz, and Jawbox with Zach Barocas for rock music.
Wow, that's fantastic. I don't know them, so I'm going to check them out. That's very cool.
Ilya, you know, I was so thrilled.
Yeah, you go down the rabbit hole with those guys.
I was so thrilled when Duke told me you were going to come on, because Modern Drummer really is one of my favorite publications, and you write for them. I wanted to ask you, from a journalistic point of view, how have things changed from maybe the way you did it 10 years ago, where people were buying the magazine, and now everything's online, and we have all this information overload, and things are on YouTube and social media and so forth. What is it like today to be working for Modern Drummer and really be at the forefront? But how do you get that message out there, all the great content, where we used to get the magazine? And I assume that the magazine is not really, or tell me if it's not, I would assume the magazine is not really the driving force anymore behind that whole effort.
You know, the magazine is still obviously around and still in print, but as all the bigger magazines, and that one, you know, you would think Modern Drummer had a huge distribution, but it obviously doesn't have the distribution of, say, a Rolling Stone or, you know, or the New York Times or something like that. But print is still key for these magazines because they can't just shut down the physical, you know, version of it and go completely online. Some places can do that, but you know, the thing about it is they still have to rely on advertising, and they have to rely on subscriptions. It's a combination of all those things, and so things are certainly changing in terms of how people get that magazine. And sometimes, you know, you can't even find certain things at Barnes and Noble, and then a pandemic hits and it disrupts the supply chains and all that kind of stuff. But I've been writing for the magazine for I guess 15 years now. And the one thing that has certainly changed is I used to meet a lot of people in person. You know, I was fortunate enough to interview certain people where I'd be invited on their tour bus, like Carter Beauford from Dave Matthews Band. I remember doing the interview on his tour bus. And, you know, certain other people I was fortunate to meet, maybe not huge names, but smaller guys where I would still meet them in person in their you know, apartment or their house physically, and with the tape recorder right there, having an exchange where we were doing it, you know, in real time. Over the years, especially when it's a West Coast guy, or, you know, I had the privilege of talking to people like, you know, Dave Weckl, people like that. And all of that was always done through the phone. But the great thing is the technology, just like what we're doing now, you know, with Zoom and FaceTime, you can still kind of do a face-to-face, even though you're not in their presence. I did a cover story on Simon Phillips recently, and Simon insisted on FaceTime. I never say that that's my preference, because I don't know if they want to be seen. They could be in their pajamas. You know, a lot of these people have their image to uphold, but Simon wanted to do it on FaceTime. So instead of just the audio version, we did a FaceTime version, and that's not the version that, you know, obviously was released. It's not a thing that Modern Drummer does, except for their podcasts and, you know, their video interviews. But he wanted to do it. He wanted to see my face, and that was pretty cool. He's an old school guy, you know, and he wanted to do it that way. So that's the major difference in terms of the way the interviews are done. But still, you know, it's the same thing that it's always been, where you're asking them questions, and if they're open and giving, then it doesn't matter if it's on audio or video or in person. I was lucky enough to interview Neil Peart during their Rush's 40th anniversary, their last tour, which turned out to be, unfortunately, his last tour. And he invited me, you know, the band invited me backstage before the show. And so I got to do that in person as well. And that's, you know, an unbelievable thing to have done, because I could have done it over the phone and it would have been great, but it wouldn't have been the same. So I prefer in person, but, you know, it's not always to be, especially with the technology the way it is.
With all the people you've interviewed, I'm sure your interviewing skills have improved. Did you ever... I
don't know about that.
Did you ever find yourself in a situation where you were interviewing somebody and you realized that you forgot you were interviewing them and you ended up just bullshitting?
Yeah, you try not to do that. You know, you try to always be aware of a few different things when you're talking to famous people, and they don't have to be famous in a ShopRite, but they're famous amongst us, and they would get recognized, many of them. I mean, I've done, you know, Joey Kramer from Aerosmith, and people who might be recognized in New Jersey somewhere, maybe not, but you never know. We would certainly recognize them. And you try not to fanboy out. A lot of people told me, they asked me if I got a picture with Neil when I was with him, and I would never do that. You know, right. I couldn't ask him for that. And so you try to always remember a few things, like I said, one of which is this isn't their first interview, and probably not their first interview they're doing with a drumming magazine. So there's many drumming magazines, and sometimes these guys grant interviews to all of them or a couple of them. And so they're used to being spoken to about the same subjects. So if you think you're coming up with such a great question about some beat on some song, and you're thinking, well, nobody heard that beat except me, and I'm going to ask him what his stroking was. Well, maybe someone asked them that 10 minutes ago or yesterday. So you never want to just get too friendly with them unless they go that way, and you kind of got to give and take with some of these guys. I was fortunate enough to speak with Alex Van Halen, and they're splitting up that interview with a Legends book. The Modern Drummer is doing this Legends thing where they're combining all their past interviews together and then giving a new interview. And that's half of mine will be in that. And then the other one is going to come out, I don't know, next issue or the issue after that, where the other half of my interview is going to be in the print regular magazine, Modern Drummer regular print issue. And, it's hard to explain, but Alex Van Halen wasn't going to talk about his muffling technique on his toms in the 1984 tour. Like, he certainly wasn't going to talk about any of that. And it was my duty per my editors to kind of speak to him about certain songs. And through his tech and handlers, we found out that he wanted to talk about some of his older songs, kind of a retrospective look back. So I went there. I asked him about Hot for Teacher because, I'm always thinking there's a 17-year-old that doesn't know what we know. He's not our age. And so a 17-year-old doesn't know what Alex said about Hot for Teacher, 35 years ago. So I did go there, and he was cool about it, and he wanted to talk about it. But then Alex, someone like him, who is just like a, explosive kind of funny, and you never know what you're going to get. And so he went in all these different places. He started talking to me about David Lee Roth and about his brother and about all this stuff completely provoked and I don't know what the right word is, but I didn't nudge him in that direction. He just started talking about it as if he was answering a question from some other, journalist who is trying to dig about the inner dynamics of the band. And I really wasn't. I really didn't care. I would have loved to talk to him about his muffling and tuning on his snare and how he gets his sound and all that stuff. So he was a guy that was just kind of like on, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But it wasn't chummy. And look, his brother died a week later, and I had no semblance that anything was wrong. So I really think there was a precipitous drop in his brother's health. It had to be right after we spoke, because it was literally a week later, and he wouldn't have given me the time if he was going to the hospital or whatever it was. So he was in a great mood, and he was cool, and he wanted to speak to me again the next day. And that was completely him, Yeah, we spoke on a Saturday, and then he wanted to speak the next day. So, but he wasn't my buddy. You know what I mean? He's a famous rock star, and I just had a good, repartee with him. But I don't really fan out too much,
Ilya, I want to ask you, and I guess I'm going to, this is about you because you're our guest, but this is the only way I can really ask you this question. The gentleman's name it escapes my memory. Who was the long-term lead singer for Yes? John Anderson. Okay. So Ilya, here's the deal. I have done some journalistic work in my career as well, and at the time I was working for a publication, which I think was in Los Angeles, called Live to Play. I forgot what they were called before that. So the editor called me and said, I want you to go interview John Anderson. And at the time, I didn't go meet him, but I interviewed him on the phone. And at the time, I'm still not really a big Yes fan. I respect them to death, but I was not a fan. And I'm coming to a question. So what happened was I got him on the phone, talking to him, very nice guy. And I could tell from talking with him, because I didn't really know what to ask him that he hadn't been asked 10,000 times before. And I've never been one of these people to ask Derek Jeter, like, you hit 4 home runs tonight. How do you feel? What's he going to say? I feel terrible. So as I'm talking to him, I keep hearing these interruptions. And I remember saying to him, I said, is this a bad time to talk? He goes, no, it's a very busy day. He said, I said, well, if you want me to reschedule it, I said, we could do it. He goes, no, as a matter of fact, I just passed my citizenship test. So he was at the time a dual citizen, I believe, of England and the United States. So he had passed his United States citizenship test. So as we're talking, I don't know what made me think of this, but I didn't feel like I was really getting anything earth-shattering. So I said to him, I said, do you really want to talk about this? And he said, no. He goes, I'll talk about it if you want to. I said, well, what would you like to talk about? He goes, I'm really proud of my citizenship. And he went on for 20 minutes and spoke about it. So my question to you is, have you, in the number of interviews you've done, has someone come out with something where you really was out of left field, or you never thought, like, this person would tell me this, and it was something very, very unique that you, not like a scoop, but you're just like, wow, I did not know that you thought that, or that was even going on in your life, or you be that type of person?
Yeah, once in a while you'll get something that is a little bit left field, and it's always non-musical, and sometimes the motivation might be just commercial. Like Joey Kramer from Aerosmith, he started talking about his coffee, rockin' and roasted, and he just wanted to push that, and so he kind of led things that way, because he certainly wasn't going to talk about coming up with the beat for Walk This Way, you know what I mean? Not 40 years into the career. And Alex Van Halen was very candid. He was talking about David Lee Roth. He's like, he was saying 90% of what David Lee Roth gives you is garbage, but that 10% is genius. And I didn't ask him about David Lee Roth. He just started talking about it, and I'm thinking, these are the kind of guys who are so deep into their relationship and have had so many things going on that they don't care. You know what I mean? It's kind of like sniping in the press. You'll hear people talking about each other, but I'm thinking, is David Lee Roth really going to read Modern Drummer? Maybe, but Alex Van Halen didn't. Yeah, maybe, but Alex Van Halen didn't care. So he was just giving me all this stuff about the dynamics of the band and talking about all of them being in the bus. He said something like they were all in a bus through 1984. And I'm thinking, wow, I figured they were a little bit bigger before that, but maybe not. It's kind of the stuff that you don't really realize. So he was very candid about his relationship with his brother and relationship with his bandmates. And he went into this stuff about why Sammy wasn't around, So yeah, once in a while, unprovoked, somebody will go into something, but I've done so many of them, and I'm trying to think of something else that was just kind of like scoop-like. I can't really think of anything, because the thing about like a Rolling Stone interview is you can talk about their extra musical things, what they're doing. A lot of those Rolling Stones interviews are like, I meet Britney Spears at a hotel, and this is what she's wearing. They all go that direction. With Modern Drummer, it's kind of like, we're going to talk about your new album. We're going to talk about it, recording it, and pre-production, and, how you're going to play these songs live on stage. It's so very specific. There's not a lot of that kind of extra musical stuff that's spoken about. So it's rare. It's a little bit more rare than maybe a general music magazine interview.
So before we started rolling, we were talking about how COVID has affected our musical scene. And I know you used to play a ton. I know you have not played. If you were to go back to the scene, what would be your ideal, now that you're a new dad again, what would be your ideal circumstance? Ideal.
Well, I play with Eddie, who never said no to a gig. And so he loves to play, and that's infectious. And the people who come to see the band, they kind of expect a certain level of energy, and we don't stop between songs. It's a lot of like cymbal wash between the first 8 songs, and I'm reaching over to drink something, and I can't because he's going into another song. And so, I always joke with him that I like to get up in between songs and do a fill and do a slam on the snare and end the song. And you can't keep going when a drummer does that, So sometimes I'll do that just to give myself a break, because it's a hard hitting gig. It's really intense, Detroit medley into a Motown medley on 11. And,
I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to express to Ken and the viewers, Ilya plays for 3 hours without stopping. When he plays, it's nonstop the entire night.
Seen it myself.
Yeah. You guys know what I'm talking about. Well, and that's the real challenge, is that, before the pandemic, we could do a 2-hour set without stopping, a 3-hour set without stopping, even though I get annoyed at that because, I'm in pain after it's like the end of the night is Rosalita and the Detroit medley. It's not like we're playing Peaceful Easy Feeling up there. But the thing that I'm getting now is that people can't dance. You know, we've played at Bar A and we've played at a Headliner, and the security, not only do they not allow you to dance, they won't allow you to stand up in your seat. And you guys have maybe seen some of this in your recent gigs. And so the challenge is playing a gig of dance music, of R&B, soul dance music with Bruce and Petty thrown in, which are grooving tunes. You know, Hungry Heart and 10th Avenue Freeze Out, they're made for people to dance. And so what you're getting now is playing that kind of high energy show to people who aren't allowed to dance. And I don't care who you are, that's difficult to do.
Yeah.
And so my ideal would be, yes, to play a little less, maybe to play less shows, not 3 or 4 shows in a weekend, not 3 or 4 shows within a 5-mile radius of Belmar or whatever we were doing. But also this kind of challenges a band to change it up, throw in a ballad here and there, throw in something with not really an aggressive dance vibe. Because people need a break. Sometimes people need a break to go to the bar or to go to the bathroom. You don't have to keep them dancing for 3 hours. Now, this is wishful thinking on my end, because I don't know if when things open up, if Eddie's going to want to do that. But that's really my ideal, is just to change it up. You know, I know we're all drummers and we're all attuned with rhythms and feels and things like that. And I always hate it when we just did a shuffle and now we're going to do another shuffle. And now we're going to do a third shuffle, because people are calling tunes and they're not thinking about that stuff. I'm thinking about that. I like to play a 16-note groove, like, you know, whatever, like Piece of My Heart or whatever it could be. And then I want to play an up-tempo tune after that. And then I want to play a shuffle. And then I want to play a ballad, because that's the way I'd like to hear it. So maybe we could do a little more of that, but I don't know. It's all out the window as soon as people can rush the stage and the packed house. And, you know, Eddie respects me, but he uses his musicians as the tools for the high energy thing that he puts forth. And I love it. Who am I kidding? You know?
And he's a sweetheart. You know, Eddie is a sweetheart. He really is.
Such a great guy and such a talented guy.
Yeah.
You know, there's a funny story that recently came out that I read, that when Billy Joel, there's a banner in Madison Square Garden. I think it's 89 record sold out shows. And someone had told me that they saw him at one of the shows and he had announced he was going to play some song that was like track number 9. I forgot the name of the album. And he announced to the audience, I'm going to play something that no one has ever, the people, I rarely play, but I just like playing it. This is the time to go to the bathroom, go get a hot dog. I won't be offended. And he starts playing it. And my friend said, literally, everyone gets up and leaves because no one knows the song. And they come back, he's playing Piano Man. So I guess we all get that. But let me ask you, being on the scene and talking to people in the know, we've gotten the sense that you talk to some of the national performers, and this is what they do. Like the people that play for the national touring acts, and you go down to talk to some of the Nashville guys, and for whatever reason in that genre, Ilya, it's, you know, some of those guys are just touring drummers. They don't record. They're not session guys. What are you hearing about when this will come back, or planning tours on the large level? Because I was very interested to see, I think it was a couple of months ago, you might remember, Bruce Springsteen came out, and when you said that reminded me. He came out and said, I don't see my band touring until 2022, and I only have so much time, so I'm not happy to say that. What is the general feeling you're getting of when are these guys going to finally, guys and girls, get back to work?
The feeling I get is, I'm not going to use the word dread, but I think people are very concerned. People are very concerned because it's one thing to play Bar A and people are sitting down and, you know, you've got a local act that can draw a couple of people. But when we're talking stadiums and arenas and amphitheaters and even the Count Basie, I know they're doing this thing with the Vogel where it's tables, but it's a liability for the artist and for the venue, for the promoters. You know, COVID is weird because sometimes it's asymptomatic. You don't know when you got it. If you go to an amphitheater and you caught COVID 2 days after that show, but you say you got it at the amphitheater, and now you're suing Styx and you're suing PNC and you're suing Live Nation. They can't afford that. So I wish I had an answer, but the people that I speak to, and some of these touring guys like you guys have spoken to, Todd Zuckerman, these kind of guys who rely on a name act that does amphitheaters, Nobody's buying the new Styx record. You know what I mean? Nobody's buying the new whatever record. I mean, who knows? I guess Letter to You, Springsteen, I guess it's sold, but who knows? You know, it's hard. It's not like it used to be. It's not, you know, it used to be the records, the touring would promote the record. You'd see a band live and then you'd go buy the record. Now, now there is, you know, there's streaming and all that stuff. So people have to tour as opposed to getting off the road like a lot of bands did. You know, your Beatles and your XTCs and your Steely Dans, they just stopped touring because they could just record and sell records. It's not like that for people like, you know, Todd Zuckerman, who relies on Styx playing the amphitheaters. And they don't know, and they're nervous. And I'd be nervous too, because, you know, how are you going to convince people to go out? And how are you going to convince them from not being litigious about you know, the venue and the band itself? It's definitely I think it's a scary time, and also a scary time for some of these bands that are not spring chickens. You know, Bruce is what, 71 or whatever he is, and some of these bands are really up there, and who knows how much time they have. You know, they're not young, and Springsteen's show and his vocals, and you know, I can't imagine him doing that into his late 70s. So we're missing out on a lot of time. And some of these bands, frankly, won't come back, you know, just to start up the machine and to pay all the people and to pay all the people employed by a band. I'm not really sure. It's going to be very interesting. I'm thinking by maybe next summer, when you maybe will have to produce a negative COVID result, or to say that you got vaccinated. But not to be a downer, they're saying even if you got the vaccine, you can still get COVID and you can still pass it along. It's just that you might not get as sick. Maybe you won't be put on a ventilator. But if I got the vaccine,
Now hold on. I just want to be clear. When you said next summer, are you talking summer 21 or summer 22?
I'm thinking not before 22. I'm really not.
Okay. Duke, how
because,
about that? There you go.
Think about this. It's basically March, right? I mean, is there going to be a Stone Pony Summer Stage series this year? I mean, you got to sell tickets. You got to announce those shows. I don't see it happening. Not this year.
Yeah, I think you're right.
You know.
Now, Duke, I want to just do a follow-up because I know Ilya's the perfect person to ask. Let's talk about, particularly in your line of journalism, how is this affecting, it might be somewhat obvious to you, but explain to us and the viewers, how is this also affecting the vendors? I mean, Modern Drummer is also a lot about equipment, right?
Well, yeah, it's affecting the vendors, but it's also affecting, you know, just the subject of the stories too. It's like, what are you going to talk to a guy about? I was supposed to actually interview Tommy Lee, and it fell apart because he was putting out a record that had no live drums on it. It had all programming. And there was not that tour that they were going to do. It was what? It was Motley Crue, Poison, and Def Leppard, right?
Right.
Was that tour? Big stadium tour. And I couldn't talk to him about anything. You know what I mean? So Simon Phillips, you know, these people that I've done recently, Simon Phillips and Alex Van Halen, also not touring. Alex Van Halen hasn't toured in 5 years, you know. I could talk to him about Drop Dead Legs. But so the lack of touring is one thing. You would think that a lot of these people are recording, and so maybe you can talk to them about that, but a lot of them are keeping that secret or not announcing that they have a new record out. So yeah, it's affecting a lot of different things. Wow. And like you said, the vendors and the equipment companies, I mean, that's a whole other issue, is like, who's going in to buy real drums when some people are buying, you know, electronic equipment, and DJs are so hot and all that stuff. That's all cyclical. People will always buy drums and guitars and get into the Beatles. I mean, I don't think that's ever going away, but there are, you know, crests and troughs with that. And that certainly is affecting a manufacturer, because how are you going to sell drums when no one needs drums for live touring right now?
I think very much drum head companies must be dying because nobody's touring. So how many people are going through drum heads? You know, you're not,
Good point.
I don't care if you're
Good
practicing, you know, 8 hours a day. You're still not, you don't practice with the intensity you do when you're doing a live show, you know, it just doesn't happen. So
that's exactly it. Right. No, I'm not surprised though. I'm not surprised, Duke. It's a weird time, you know, it's a weird time.
Yeah.
It certainly is strange for all the different facets of touring. You know, you've got all the people behind the scenes, or Broadway, the people who make the costumes, everyone's affected.
Right.
You know, and so it's tough. You can't just sit back and collect. I mean, Rihanna and Beyonce can, but not the real working bands, you know?
Right. Right. You know, I know we talked about Van Halen a lot, but I always thought that was one of the coolest things, that they each shared full authorship of the songs. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple bands like that, like U2. You know.
I didn't know they did that. That's why Larry Mullen, Larry Mullen Jr. is.
That's why Larry Mullen.
He's like the third. He's the third richest drummer in the world.
Well, that's why. Second. Because when Achtung Baby sold its records and One was on the radio, and you know, going back to With or Without You or whatever, he's in the mix there.
That's awesome.
So and as opposed to somebody like. I mean, if you think about if you look up like John Deacon, the bassist for Queen, who after Freddie died, he completely dropped off. He does not involved in any Queen anything for 30 years, right? But he wrote "You're My Best Friend" and another one, "Bites the Dust," and you know, "Under Pressure" is his bass line, all that stuff. So there's a lot of different writers in a band like that. So when you look him up, he's worth whatever 60. 80, $100 million because he had big hits. But Larry Mullen Jr. didn't write "Where the Streets Have No Name." You know what I mean? I mean, we can get into a discussion whether drum parts should be part of publishing, and are they, you know, I actually asked Joey Kramer, I said, what's more famous, the drum part in, you know, the beat and Walk This Way, or the guitar part? And he's like, come on, man. You know, and it was a cool little moment. Obviously that's such a integral part of that song. But let's face it, With or Without You, and you know, those songs he didn't write, but he's doing very well because they split it 4 ways, and maybe that's why they survived. You know, Rush survived because those guys are friends and such creative geniuses, and I'm sure Neil's got some money because he wrote those lyrics. Had some money, but yeah, you know, maybe.
Well, look at all the. Well, Ilya, look at all the problems Kiss had with that stuff. So, yeah, you're right. It does tend to cause problems. Absolutely.
Right. Absolutely. And I interviewed Eric Singer from Kiss, and he's, you know, not the original guy, obviously, and has to put on, you know, all the has to sing Beth and has to do all that stuff. But from speaking to him, there's 2 other guys in that band that call the shots, you know. And I'm sure Bono and The Edge call the shots, but you know, I'm sure Larry has his say, and I'm sure Alex Van Halen has his say. The band's named after kind of him.
And you know, it's funny. I had heard if you play in the Duke Clement trio, you get no cut of anything. Is that true? So listen, I can't thank you enough for your time, but I got one more for me. If anyone, alive or dead, in the history of this world and music, you could sit down and interview and ask them one question, who would it be? It doesn't, from the beginning of time till now, you could ask them one question, anything goes. Who would it be, and what would you ask them?
And what would I ask them? Wow, that is really hard. I don't know. I think of like the really fascinating people throughout the years, you know, like the Brian Enos and the Frank Zappas and Neil Peart. You know, speaking of Neil Peart, I was like, this is the smartest guy I've ever been in the presence of. You know what I mean? This is just brilliant people. I don't know. Maybe I would ask Frank Zappa something like, you know, he was really good at predicting what was going to happen. He predicted, you know, not predicted, but he was kind of in tune with what the internet would have, what, you know, music distribution. There's some things he said that made it sound like technology was really going to change music distribution and the way you got it. Same with Brian Eno. Brian Eno said some fascinating things about, you know, buying records was just a thing that happened and won't happen ever again, you know, this time. But I don't know, maybe I'd ask Frank, you know, what he thought was going to happen. Or maybe you know, could I come back there with the knowledge of what I know and tell him what happened and just ask him what he thought? You know, here's the internet,
Sure.
here's Spotify, you know, it'd be fascinating to it. Actually, I think about this all the time, not to make this a long-winded question, but a lot of people, I talk about this with buddies or whatever late night, and they're like, what would Chopin think of, you know, Green Day? Or what would, you know, what would these kind of people who are geniuses, but had, you know, they wrote for an orchestra, they wrote for piano or a string quartet. What would they think about today's music, you know, pop music? And I would love to go back in time and talk to Beethoven about, you know, Frank Zappa or whatever, Queen. And if you could get past the electronic, you know, explaining to them electric guitars and keyboards and synthesizers, they would have to understand that quickly, that the technology made it so things could be, you know, reproduced and synthesized and sequenced and things like that. I think they would love today's music, you know, maybe, I don't know. But I would love to ask, you know, these kind of classic guys, the Beethovens and the Chopins, just to play them Bohemian Rhapsody and be like, this is what happens. This is what happens with chord progressions and, you know, harmony. And it's like, in the end, it's all harmony and melody and rhythm, right? Mm-hmm. Slayer and Tori Amos, they're pretty similar when you break it down. It's, you know, notes, there's 12 notes and harmony and combining the notes, and what rhythm is it? Is it an odd time? Are we in 7? Are we in 4? Are we, you know, whatever. And I think someone like Chopin would probably appreciate Queen, you know? I really do.
Interesting. Very interesting.
You know, yeah.
I always wanted to ask Buddy Rich if he was at a Motorhead concert and Lemmy said, you want to come up and play Ace of Spades? Are you going to do it or not?
It's funny because someone like a Buddy Rich notoriously like wouldn't like rock and roll. You know, they kind of put they thumb their nose kind of at rock and roll, which I always found disappointing because it's like, I don't love certain types of music, but I can appreciate the craft that goes into those types of musics. And so it's always disappointing when you hear like a Buddy Rich didn't like the Beatles or whatever it was, you know, and I'm just like, really? But, you know, what are you going to do?
Well, definitely appreciate you taking time to talk with us today. It's been great having you on. I wish you nothing but health and happiness with the baby and tons more interviews, because we know all the drummers are home. So
that's right.
Start calling.
It was my pleasure to speak with you guys. I really appreciate what you guys do, and it's needed in a time like this. You know, when people can hear different voices and keep doing what you guys are doing.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for some time. It really was a great pleasure to talk to you. I really mean that. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.